It was a quiet afternoon in Carmel by the Sea, California. Clint Eastwood, 93, sat on the porch of his beloved Mission Ranch, sipping his usual black coffee. The air smelled of salt and fresh-cut grass, a stark contrast to the storm brewing on the horizon of his peaceful life. A figure approached, cutting through the serenity. A man, perhaps in his late 30s, with unkempt hair and trembling hands, stood before Clint. His face bore the wear of a hard life. Clint, sharp-eyed as ever, looked up and asked, Can help you? You owe me, the stranger said, his voice low but firm. Clint frowned. Owe you? I don't even know you. The man stepped closer, clutching a crumpled letter. You don't remember me, but my father, he saved your life. And before he died, he said you promised to repay him. I'm here to collect what's mine. Clint's heart skipped a beat. Memories flooded back, of a war, a storm, and a selfless act of bravery. He set down his coffee. You better come inside. The stranger followed. Inside the quiet ranch house, decades of secrets were about to unravel. The living room was lined with memories, pictures of Clint's family, awards, and film memorabilia. The stranger looked around, his eyes lingering on a black and white photo of Clint in military uniform. You served in Korea, the man said, his tone softer. Clint nodded. It was a lifetime ago. The stranger handed him the letter. My father wrote this before he died. He said you made a promise. Clint unfolded the letter with steady hands. As he read, his face turned pale. The words detailed a harrowing night during the Korean War. Clint had been trapped under enemy fire, and a soldier, James Taylor, risked his life to save him. At the bottom of the letter, James had written, Clint, if you ever make it back alive, promise me you'll look after my family if I don't. That's all I ask. Clint's voice cracked. James was a hero. I didn't know he had a family. I tried to find him after the war, but he came home, but life wasn't kind. The man interrupted. We lost everything after he died. Clint sat in silence, guilt weighing heavily on him. I'll make this right, he finally said. But how? Days turned into restless nights. Clint couldn't shake the stranger's words or the memory of James Taylor's sacrifice. He hadn't just saved Clint's life, he'd given him a second chance. The stranger, who introduced himself as Michael, stayed in town, waiting for Clint to decide how he would fulfill his promise. Meanwhile, Clint dug through old military records and reached out to surviving comrades. Each phone call was a painful reminder of the past. One evening, Clint invited Michael over. Your father was more than a soldier, Clint began, his voice steady. He was a man of incredible courage. I owe him my life, and I owe you an apology for not finding you sooner. Michael's eyes filled with tears. I didn't come here to guilt you, Mr. Eastwood. I came because I've run out of options. What do you need? Clint asked. Michael hesitated. It's not about money. It's about a chance to rebuild what my father left behind. Clint's heart ached. He knew this was more than a debt. It was a chance to honor a hero's legacy. But how could he do it justice? It was another calm evening at Mission Ranch when Clint heard the knock on his door. He opened it to find a young woman standing there, clutching a folder tightly against her chest. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying for hours. Mr. Eastwood, she began, her voice trembling. My name is Emily Carter. You don't know me, but you owe me money. Clint stared at her, confused. Miss, I think you've got the wrong person. No, she insisted, opening the folder and pulling out a faded receipt. My grandmother worked for you years ago as a housekeeper. She said you fired her unfairly and never paid her what you owed. She died broke, leaving us with nothing. I'm here to ask for what's rightfully hers. Clint felt the weight of her words. He searched his memory for any recollection of Emily's grandmother. Was it possible? Could he have overlooked something so important? "Come in," Clint said quietly. Emily hesitated but stepped inside. As Clint listened to her story, an unsettling feeling grew in his chest. The truth, he realized, might be far more complicated than either of them expected. Clint sat at the kitchen table, staring at the old receipt Emily had handed him. The date on it was from 1971, a time when he was rising to fame and juggling multiple projects. "I'm sorry," Clint said, "but I don't remember your grandmother. What was her name?" "Evelyn Carter," Emily replied, her voice cracking. Clint's heart skipped. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but he couldn't place it. He got up and rummaged through an old filing cabinet in the corner. Dust and faded papers greeted him as he searched for anything that might hold the answers. After an hour of silence, Clint found a contract bearing Evelyn Carter's name. It was for a short-term housekeeping job during the filming of Dirty Harry. His hands trembled as he read it. The agreement was clear, but there was no record of payment. "I don't know what to say," Clint admitted. "If this is true, I owe your family an apology, and more." Emily's tears fell freely now. "All I want is for her memory to be respected. She worked so hard and no one cared." Clint clenched his jaw, determined to uncover the full story. Clint couldn't sleep that night. He sat in his study, staring at Evelyn's contract. Why hadn't he remembered her? Had he truly overlooked paying someone who had worked so hard for him? The next morning, Clint called an old friend, Paul Morgan, who had managed his personal affairs in the early 70s. "Paul, I need your help," Clint began. "Do you remember Evelyn Carter? She worked for me during Dirty Harry." Paul paused on the other end of the line. "Clint, Evelyn wasn't fired. She quit." "What?" Clint asked, his heart sinking. "She came to me one day in tears, said she couldn't keep working because her daughter was sick. I told her you'd understand, but she didn't want to bother you. I thought I sent her final paycheck, but I can't say for sure." Clint's chest tightened. A good woman had been left to struggle because of a mistake that wasn't entirely his, yet still his responsibility. Emily deserved closure. Her grandmother deserved justice. And Clint knew he had to set things right, no matter the cost. Clint couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. After his call with Paul, he returned to the folder Emily had brought. Among the faded documents was a handwritten letter, yellowed with age. It was addressed to Mr. Eastwood and signed by Evelyn Carter. Clint unfolded it carefully. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. "Dear Mr. Eastwood, thank you for giving me a chance to work for you. I'm sorry to leave so suddenly, but my daughter is very sick, and I need to be by her side. I've always admired your work, but more than that, your kindness, I hope you'll understand. Please don't think badly of me. Sincerely, Evelyn Carter." Clint's eyes welled up. Evelyn had left with dignity, not wanting to burden him with her troubles. He looked up at Emily, who was sitting silently across the room. "I should have known," Clint whispered. "She wasn't just a worker. She was a mother trying to do her best." Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "She always said you were a good man. She believed it until the end." Clint clenched the letter tightly. He had to make amends, not just for Evelyn, but for the family she left behind. Determined to piece together Evelyn's story, Clint decided to visit some of the places she might have worked or lived. He invited Emily to join him, wanting her to feel included in the journey. Their first stop was an old diner where Clint used to eat during filming. The owner, now in his 80s, remembered Evelyn. "She was a sweet woman," the man said, "always smiling, even when times were tough. She used to bring her daughter in for a slice of pie when she could afford it." Clint felt a lump in his throat. He could picture Evelyn, tired but hopeful, sitting with her little girl. Next, They visited the hospital where Evelyn's daughter had been treated. The records revealed a heartbreaking truth. Evelyn had spent years in and out of the hospital fighting to keep her daughter alive. The financial strain had been immense. Emily clutched Clint's arm as they left the hospital. "She gave up everything for my mom," she said, "and we never got the chance to thank her." Clint's voice cracked. "Then we'll honor her now. It's not too late to do the right thing." Clint knew he couldn't change the past, but he could shape the future. He sat down with Emily and laid out a plan. "I want to create something lasting in your grandmother's memory," Clint said. "A foundation, perhaps. Something to help struggling families like hers." Emily's eyes widened. "You'd do that?" "I have to," Clint replied. "It's the least I can do." Word spread quickly about Clint's efforts. News outlets picked up the story, sparking debates online. Some praised Clint for his humility, while others criticized him for taking so long to act. But Clint didn't care about the opinions of strangers. He focused on building the Evelyn Carter Foundation, pouring his resources into helping families in need. He also invited Emily to work with him, ensuring her grandmother's legacy was preserved. As they finalized the plans, Emily handed Clint a small photo. It was of Evelyn, holding a young Emily on her lap. "She always believed people were good," Emily said softly. "Thank you for proving her right." Clint held the photo close, his eyes filled with tears. "It's not just her legacy," he said. "It's her story, and we'll make sure the world remembers it." While working on the foundation, Clint received a surprising package in the mail. It was from a man named Harold Jenkins, a retired banker. Inside the envelope was an old ledger from the 1970s, the cover faded but intact. Along with it was a note. "Mr. Eastwood, I thought you might find this useful. Evelyn Carter once mentioned your name during a visit to the bank. I believe there's something in here you need to see. Harold Jenkins." Clint opened the ledger with trembling hands, his heart pounding. On one page, under a column labeled Loans, he found Evelyn's name. Next to it, a large sum was marked as Paid in Full, with Clint Eastwood listed as the guarantor. He stared at the words in disbelief. He had no memory of signing such an agreement. Had Evelyn forged his name out of desperation? Or had someone else stepped in on his behalf? Emily noticed the confusion on Clint's face. "What is it?" she asked. Clint handed her the ledger. "It seems I helped your grandmother more than I realized, but I can't remember doing this." Emily's face turned pale. "Do you think she might have been too proud to tell you?" Haunted by the new discovery, Clint visited Harold Jenkins, who was now living in a small town nearby. The elderly banker was thrilled to meet the legendary actor in person, but quickly became serious when Clint showed him the ledger. "Do you remember this?" Clint asked. Harold nodded slowly. "I do. Evelyn came to me in tears one day. She was about to lose everything. She said a guardian angel had come through for her and co-signed her loan. I never met you in person, but the papers had your signature." Clint's mind raced. He was known for helping people quietly, but this felt like something more. "Could someone else have signed on my behalf?" Harold shrugged. "It's possible, but Evelyn truly believed it was you. She spoke of you like a hero. She said you were one of the few people who believed in her." Clint's throat tightened. If someone else had helped Evelyn, they had done so in his name. And now, decades later, the truth was surfacing, bringing with it a flood of emotions and unanswered questions. "Thank you," Clint said quietly. "This means more than you know." The mystery of the loan consumed Clint. That night, he went through his old memorabilia, searching for clues. Among the boxes, he found an envelope labeled "From John Wayne." Inside was a letter dated 1975. "Clint, I saw that woman who worked for you. She reminded me of my own mother, struggling but proud. I couldn't stand by and do nothing. I signed the papers for her loan. I hope you don't mind. Sometimes doing the right thing means doing it quietly. Your friend, John Wayne. Clint sat in stunned silence, the weight of the letter sinking in. His longtime friend and fellow actor, John Wayne, had quietly stepped in to help Evelyn, all without saying a word. Emily entered the room and saw the letter in Clint's hand. "What is it?" she asked. Clint handed it to her, tears welling in his eyes. It was Wayne. He did this. He believed in her. Emily read the letter, her own tears falling freely. "He was truly a guardian angel," she whispered. Clint nodded, a mix of gratitude and sorrow washing over him. It's time the world knows the kind of man he really was. Clint Eastwood stared at the letter, his hands trembling. Memories of John Wayne flooded his mind, their shared laughs, their heated debates, and their unshakable friendship. Wayne had always been a man of honor, and now, even in his absence, his kindness was leaving a profound mark. "I never knew," Clint murmured. Emily sat beside him, her own heart aching. "He didn't do it for recognition. He did it because he believed in helping people." Clint nodded. Wayne was a man who believed in action over words. He didn't need applause, that's what made him extraordinary. But as the reality of the gesture set in, Clint felt an overwhelming sense of guilt. "I should have noticed Evelyn's struggles back then. I should have been the one to step in." Emily placed her hand on his. "Maybe he knew you were already carrying enough. That's what true friends do. They help without you even asking." Clint's eyes filled with tears. At 93 years old, he thought he had experienced every emotion life could offer. But this moment cut deeper than anything else. Wayne's quiet act of generosity was a reminder of the power of selflessness. "This story isn't over," Clint said softly. Emily reached out to Evelyn's daughter, Susan, the next morning. She was hesitant at first, but curiosity won her over. When Susan arrived at Clint's home, she was visibly nervous. "I can't believe I'm standing here. My mother used to talk about you all the time. She always said you were her angel." Clint shook his head. "I wasn't the angel. It was John Wayne. He helped her when I didn't even know she needed it." Susan's eyes widened as Emily handed her the letter. She read it slowly, tears streaming down her face. "I remember the day she got the loan. She told me it was a miracle. I had no idea." Her voice broke. "She never stopped fighting for us," Susan continued. "That loan saved our home. It gave her the chance to rebuild our lives." Clint leaned forward, his voice firm yet filled with regret. "Your mother was a remarkable woman. I'm sorry I didn't realize what she was going through back then." Susan reached for his hand. "You've done enough just by honoring her memory. Sharing this story will mean the world to people like her." Clint knew she was right. Clint and Emily decided to record a heartfelt video, sharing the entire story. It wasn't just about Evelyn or John Wayne. It was about the hidden acts of kindness that ripple through generations. Sitting in his living room, Clint began, "There are moments in life that remind you of the goodness in people. This is one of those moments." He spoke of Evelyn's strength, John Wayne's quiet heroism, and the unexpected ways their lives had intertwined. Emily added her perspective, highlighting the impact of small, selfless acts. As they finished filming, Clint felt a sense of peace. For the first time, he realized the importance of acknowledging the past, not just for himself, but for everyone who might find hope in this story. When they posted the video online, the response was immediate. Comments poured in from people of all ages, many sharing their own stories of silent heroes in their lives. One comment stood out. "Thank you for reminding us of what truly matters: kindness, friendship, and the courage to care." But the story wasn't over yet. Clint had one final gesture to make. The next morning, Clint Eastwood sat by his fireplace, the faint crackling of logs filling the silent room. In his hand, he held a small envelope Susan had left behind. It was addressed to him, in Evelyn's delicate handwriting. He opened it carefully, as though the paper might crumble under his touch. "Dear Mr. Eastwood, I hope this letter finds you well. I've hesitated to write for years, not out of anger, but out of fear you'd see it as a burden. I wanted to say thank you, not for money or fame, but for inspiring strength. Watching your movies, your grit, your resilience, it gave me courage when life seemed impossible. When Mr. Wayne helped me, I told him I'd repay every cent. He just smiled and said, 'You owe me nothing, but maybe one day you can pass it on.' I've tried to do that ever since. If you're reading this, know that you've already given more than you realize. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart. Sincerely, Evelyn Turner." Clint's hands shook as he folded the letter. Tears blurred his vision. Evelyn's words pierced his soul. He whispered, "Pass it on. I'll make it right." Clint called Emily into his study. "I need your help. I want to set up a foundation in Evelyn's name. Something to help single parents who are struggling, just like she did." Emily's face lit up. "That's a beautiful idea, Clint. But it's more than that. It's what she would have wanted." The foundation was launched within weeks, and Clint insisted on keeping Evelyn's story at the heart of it. He spoke openly about the guilt he carried and how John Wayne's quiet heroism inspired him to act. The announcement made headlines, drawing attention from fans and critics alike. One day, as Clint addressed a crowd at the foundation's first event, he noticed Susan sitting in the audience, tears streaming down her face. After his speech, she hugged him tightly. "This is what Mom always dreamed of," she said. "Thank you for making it real." Clint smiled, his voice soft but firm. It's never too late to do the right thing. Behind the scenes, Emily uploaded a video of the event to Clint's channel, capturing every raw emotional moment. It quickly went viral, with millions of viewers moved by the story of redemption and kindness. Sitting in his home months later, Clint reflected on the journey. He had spent a lifetime playing heroes, but for the first time, he felt like he had truly become one. Emily interrupted his thoughts. "The videos got over 10 million views, Clint. People are sharing stories of how they've been inspired to help others." Clint nodded, a faint smile on his face. "It's not about the views, it's about the message. Evelyn's story deserves to live on." The camera rolled as Clint addressed his viewers one last time. "Life isn't about the roles we play or the awards we win, it's about the lives we touch. Evelyn Turner reminded me of that. And if her story has touched you, then I ask one thing: pass it on. If you've ever been inspired, if this story has moved you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And leave a comment. Tell us about the heroes in your life. And don't forget to subscribe. Together, we can make sure stories like Evelyn's are never forgotten." The video ended, but the impact was only beginning. Viewers flooded the comments with their own tales of kindness, proving that the power of a good deed truly knows no limits.